So in this video I wanted to talk about a subject that is pretty serious, and that's people getting scammed out of their sometimes their life savings through housing here in the Philippines. People have a tendency here to come over here to not be on guard. So when you come here, a lot of people meet younger, more beautiful women, and sometimes they do stuff that they wouldn't necessarily do in the West. Like, for example, here in the Philippines, you're not allowed to own land as a foreigner. Only Filipinas are allowed to own land. So what people do is they'll buy land in their girlfriend's name, in their wife's name. They'll build a house on it, and things don't necessarily go well. And what ends up happening is that the Filipina ends up with the house. The girl usually ends up with the house and the land. Now, for some guys, they, financially they can get over it, but for some other guys, they can't. I mean, it's probably close to their lifetime savings, and I've heard of people that have actually had to go back to the West, at 60, 70, and actually do work because they don't have enough money to live. So it's a pretty serious situation, and I kind of wanted to discuss that. So what can you own here in the Philippines legally? You can own a condo, meaning the condo will actually be in your name. As a foreigner, you're allowed to own condos. And as far as I know, that's the only type of home you're allowed to own. You can also do one more thing, and that is, if you want to buy a house, land and house, you can do a lease. So as an example, let's say a Filipino A selling a lot and land and lots. A lot and a house, and you want to buy that one, and let's say it's costs $100,000. As an example, that's a nice house here in Dumaguete, Philippines. So what can you do besides put it in your girlfriend's or wife's name? You can get a lease on that house, a legal lease on that house for 25 with an extension of another 25. So basically a 50-year extension, and besides that you get a power of attorney. So that house in essence is yours. Now the lease is supposed to default back to the Filipino A in 50 years, but that's not the way it actually works. And that house you can sell to another foreigner, and he can take over the lease, or you can sell it back to a Filipina, and they'll actually get the title of the land and the house. So in essence, it's just like owning a home. So that's one way of getting around it. The only way that I know of getting around that. The other thing that's important, I think, when you buy a house here is where you want to live. So I would not buy a house unless I've been in a specific location for at least 2 years. Know the area. So for example, I've been in Dumaguete for 1 year. When I first moved here, I thought everything is fantastic, But slowly I've noticed stuff that I don't like, and are there other better areas for me? Maybe. Everybody has their own priorities, like what they value most in a certain area, whether it's restaurants, coffee shops, nature, a lot of foreigners or less foreigners. So depending on you and what you want, you have to look at different areas. I would suggest living at least 3, 4, 5 different areas before you make a final decision where you want to live. So besides renting for a couple of years, that's important in the area you want to be in. But also another thing you have to think about is, I've known people to buy homes, just a lot basically, and then a few months later or a few years later, another piece of lot is for sale, and somebody puts a pig farm right there beside their house, and it stinks. Or he gets a noisy neighbor with 5 dogs barking at 5 in the morning, no peace at all. So in essence, I would highly recommend living in a subdivision, or if it's not a subdivision, an area where they have some nice homes, where there's not a lot of land available anywhere close where someone could do something like that, basically. So a lot of people wonder, should I own a house or should I rent a house? Both have their advantages. You own a house, if there's appreciation in that area, you're going to get that depreciation. Once you sell it, it's also feels at least safer to own a house than to rent a house, as it's yours and you can be there as long as you want. However, the negatives are that if you do own a house, you're kind of stuck in one place. Yes, you can rent it out, but things can happen. For example, here in the Philippines, we have earthquakes. If there's an earthquake, glass can shatter. There is upkeep with owning, whether it's cracks or roof issues or water heaters going out, etc. It's going to cost money. When you rent, all that is covered. So renting, I would say, in the Philippines is actually cheaper than owning, because if you take that money that you would put in a house and instead put it in what we call a REIT, which is a financial instrument, basically that owns property, whether it's apartment properties or hospital properties or industrial properties or malls. It owns certain type of property that it rents out, and the money that it rents out, or what's left after all the management fees and all that, 90% of that is returned to the stockholders. So currently I'm in a few REITs, and it pays out anything from 3 to 8%. And those REITs also appreciate when their apartments or their properties appreciate. So you're getting the same positives by owning some financial assets called REITs instead of owning a house. Also, it's less risky than owning a house in the Philippines. We've already talked about the different risks. If you're renting a house and something happens between you and your girlfriend, well, you're just renting a place. If she doesn't want to move out, you can move out and just leave her there. So that's the other thing. Financially, I think it's more positive probably just to rent. As I've looked at a lot of houses here in Dumaguete for around 4 or 5 million pesos, 80,000 to 100,000, and looking at those houses and seeing what similar houses rent out for, which is about $500, that gives you return on investment, an ROI of about 6%. That's without deducting the costs, all the costs involved in the housing, whether, like we just talked about, maintenance. So in reality, your ROI is probably going to be 4 to 5%. So again, in essence, owning a financial instrument such as REITs would probably be more beneficial than owning a house here. But some people like to own their own place. I can understand that. I owned a house when I was in Dallas, and I loved being a house owner. It can be stressful at times, but having your own place and doing the garden work and making it nicer and all that, that's nice, and I can understand why people, it's not just all about money. But if you are going to buy, like we talked about, be careful. Make sure if you buy a house and a lot, make sure that you lease, that you don't put it in anybody other's name. Don't let anybody try to pressure you. Don't let any woman, wife or girlfriend or fiance, try to pressure you into putting it in her name. Okay, because just don't do that, because things can be wonderful right now. I've heard people tell me this here. It's like, oh, this girl is so special, I'm going to be with her forever. Well, everybody thinks that. Everybody thinks this girl I'm going to be with forever, she's so special. Yeah, but people end up breaking up here in the Philippines too. They actually have a saying here, walang forever, which means nothing is forever. So this is what people say to each other here in the Philippines now. Nothing is forever. These relationships are not forever. So, and things happen in life. If you put something in somebody else's name, and something happens to her family and she's got this asset and her father or mother are in the hospital and they need that money, you know what? Your priority is number two. You're not number one anymore. But if it's in your name, you can decide who you want to help, how much you want to help, and so on. So, and also, of course, if you put in somebody's name, you're kind of stuck with that girl. There's no way out. I mean, how do you get out of that relationship if things aren't going well? So the incentive for her also becomes drastically reduced as, she has you kind of by the balls. So really, really, do not put anything in somebody. Don't put property in somebody else's name. Put it in your name. No matter how much you trust that person, people change over time. Anybody gone through a divorce knows what I'm talking about, and so we'll go through the points pretty quickly here. So basically, you can buy a condo in your name. That's the safest bet. However, condos have negatives because of monthly fees, and those monthly fees can start off low but can go high. And then, of course, if we talked about lot and house and owning that versus leasing, if you lease it, you can put it in your name with a power of attorney. You can get around that. And if you need help on that, you can contact me, and I can walk you through that. So we talked about ownership versus renting, the pros and cons of each, and of course, if you do have some money and you want to invest it in some type of property, there are so-called REITs that you can invest in and get a good return. If you get let's say a 5% return on 100,000, that's $5,000 a year. So it's a good investment. Plus they do appreciate, because I've held REITs now for a couple of years and they are good investments. They're not a growth stock like the FANGs, the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Apples, and so on. But I believe they're less risky than growth stocks. So anyway, that's kind of outside what we're talking about here. So we've gone through all the points here, and just be careful. Whatever decision you make, think it thoroughly through. Be careful. Don't let yourself get influenced by any females. Make your decision based on what's best for you, and make a decision that's based on the worst possible outcome. So what I mean by that is always hope for the best and plan for the worst. Plan that girl's going to leave you. Plan that relationship is going to end. And if it doesn't, that's wonderful, but hey, you plan for the worst and you got the best out of both worlds. The other thing is that if it is in your name, remember that the girl you're with, she has a certain incentive to be with you. And if that incentive kind of goes away by you buying her a house, I've seen relationships go really bad after a guy has bought or put the name of the house and lot in her name. Things have gone from good to bad to goodbye. So just think about this. Make a rational decision, a logical decision. Do not make an emotional decision. I've given you all the points of what you should do when it comes to owning a lot and a house, if that's the route you want to go. I've also given you a different alternative than owning and renting, which to me is actually, I would say, a better alternative here in the Philippines, because housing prices are relatively high compared to rent prices, at least here in Dumaguete, but also in Cebu City, where I've lived. So that's that for now, and hope you enjoyed the video. And if you do like the video, please subscribe, like, and comment. And then if you have any questions about this, you can contact me privately, and I'll help you out any way I can. Thank you. Bye-bye.